Hello, we're going to be talking about functions. Functions are a type of code that allows us to do repeated tasks easily and very quickly. Python has some built-in functions, and we can also create our own functions. For example, here we use the function type. So when we say print the type of eval, we're calling the function type, which returns whatever the type of this eval is. So if eval is equal to 10.0 and we say print type of eval, it gives us type float. So type is one function that's built into MATLAB. We've already talked about lang. Additionally, we can create our own functions. The way that we do this is by saying def for define, give it a function name, and then we have all the inputs that we give to that function. And then after that, everything that happens within the function, and then we return the outputs. You'll notice here that everything within the function is tabbed over. There's these spaces here. These spaces are equal all the way through the function. So with this, this is a way that Python delineates what's within the function and what's outside of the function. So the first thing to be back over all the way to the left after the function is not in the function anymore. Some other programming languages have other syntax for this, such as using curly braces or other syntax. But here with Python, everything within the function, as well as within loops, as we'll see later, is just tabbed over. So this particular function would just have function name, so that's how we'd call it. We'd give it an input, and then it outputs. It does this math in here, so it takes inputs plus 5, and that calls that outputs, and then it returns outputs. So one thing to note here is that my inputs and outputs are names that exist purely within this function. So you could have another variable outside called outputs or inputs if you wanted to. It's typically good form to try to make sure that you don't have confusing things like this, just so that you, the programmer, aren't confused, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible. We can have any number of inputs that we like. Here we just have one, but we can have 100 if we really wanted to. And we can also have inputs of different types. So we could have lists, we could have arrays, we could have ints, we could have floats, whatever we'd like to do. Additionally, we can have as many outputs as we'd like. We don't have to have any outputs if we don't want any outputs, but we could have one as we have here, or a whole list of these. Okay, so let's take a look at a little bit of code here. I'm going to run this just so that everything goes through. Okay, so this top here, we're going to define our function. So here's our function. We're going to say our function name is print out info and multiply by 2. A long name, but it's descriptive of what goes on in the function. And when we run this function, we're going to be giving it input of some value. So within the function, whenever we call the function, the first thing that happens is that we print out input as a string, what the input is, what the type of the input is, and then what the ID. So there's a built-in function in Python called ID, which tells us the location within memory that this is being stored in. Then after we print out the information, we're going to say alpha is equal to input times 2, and then return alpha. So when we call our function, we're going to be knowing that there's an output from it because we're returning alpha. Okay, so you'll notice here we're back over all the way to the left. We don't have the tabbed over spaces, so these things are in the function. As soon as we don't have that tab, we're back over to the left. So first we're going to set value equal to 10, and then we're going to say outs is equal to print out info and multiply by 2 of value. So we're calling our function and giving it value, which is 10. We're providing it value, and then we're saying what's returned is equal to outs. So if we say print out info and multiply by 2 of 10, we come up here and we say, all right, we're giving this 10, so value is the equivalent of input here, so 10. So print input 10, type of 10, and then ID of 10. Then alpha is going to be equal to 10 times 2, so alpha is 20, and then return 20. So coming back down here, when we return 20, that means out is going to be 20. So here, when I say print outs, that's this outs here, because we've already called the function, we've already done these things, where say input is 10, type integer, and our location within memory. So outs is 20. So now we try to print alpha. If you remember, alpha is defined up here, but because that's a local variable, not a global variable, it doesn't exist outside of the function. When that function returns, that variable ceased to exist. So it says alpha equals, and then it gives you an error, because alpha is not defined out here, but alpha is defined in here. So if I added, say, print alpha, actually, let me just do this same statement. So print alpha equals an alpha. Let's run this again. So now we have the same thing that we had before from the output. So print input, input, type, ID. Input, what input is, the type, the ID. And then alpha is equal to 20, that's this print alpha here. Outs is equal to 20, that's this print. And then here, alpha is equal to, and alpha doesn't exist. So alpha only exists within the function. As soon as that function returns, it doesn't exist anymore.